Yes, it did. Oh my god, it's so good. So this is my first impression on Metroid Dread. I don't really have a script here, I just have a bunch of things noted down, and I'm just gonna read them off one by one. But so far, it has been an excellent Metroid experience. Now let's look back for a moment. My experience with Metroid has been Super Metroid, then Zero Mission, then some Prime games, then Fusion, and then Samus Returns, then Metroid on the NES. I'm sorry, Game Boy, but you just didn't look appealing. That's kind of the basis. I have played all Prime games. I have played a bit of other M. I don't know about pinball. So looking at all that, how does Metroid Dread do? Well, there's a lot of things to say about Metroid Dread. After 19 years, it's amazing that they're still able to make these perfect level games. Like, these absolute highest echelon of video game polish I have seen from a game. I know it's not like intense and AAA grandiose like Far Cry 6 or any other big company game. It somewhat kind of transforms into a walking simulator 2021. But for Metroid Dread, oh, it's so good! It's one of the platformer action games where it feels nice, it feels great. The gameplay and movement is incredibly smooth, with the controls being hyper-optimized. Going over some of the buttons, it has changed a bit from Super Metroid's face buttons. Shoot is now Y, which I actually kind of like. Jump is now B, which honestly I do like. A as jump is kind of weird now that I think about it. X is melee counter, this is the same as 3DS, I've gotten used to it, it's pretty cool. And A, we'll talk about that later, after the spoiler section. Now, some of the trigger buttons are being used here, but the free aim feels so good. The R-stick can't be used in this game. I thought the R-stick would be a good option to do a free aim, so like when you're walking with your left stick, so you aim with your right stick. That might have worked out better, but honestly, I don't really care. This control scheme is super good for people who've played Super Metroid, because it encourages you walking and shooting, so like going forward and shooting, up forward, down forward, or staying in place and doing free aim. I think using both stick might have been better, but I think I like this more. I think the fact that you don't need to use the stick integrally into your gameplay is great, and you can just automatically press it with the R button, because that feels a little bit more compact, in my opinion. Wall jumping is incredible. I love Super Metroid's wall jumping because it's so weird and not most people can't execute it. But in this game, wall jumping is much more easier, so I don't need to try hard my way through everything, so that's pretty relaxing. Missile is also L. You don't use the select one anymore, thank God. And also, the slide. The slide is a great addition to gameplay. I thought they might get rid of all the Morph Ball section with the slide, but no, the Morph Ball sections are still there and can only be accessed with the Morph Ball because long corridors will have her transforming into a Morph Ball, which is actually super cool. And aside from that, all the animations make it feel like you're actually controlling a person. Like, I'm gonna start comparing it to other games in the series and just other games in general, but the video game movement sometimes feels jerky, right? It's the type of format where you press a button so the character does that. So like, oh, it's like when you move in, what's it called? Link's Awakening. The remake has it so there's not really any in-between frames, so like you just kind of, Link still looks like he's moving in like some kind of 16-bit era game, but in this game, oh god, the animations are everywhere and they pair together, and the in-between frames are so intensely well-oriented. The polish is unreal. By the way, to showcase that, in this video you'll see the first attempt of me speedrunning the earliest portions of the game, so not many spoilers at the late game here, you can still look at the video, but it'll be me try-harding my best to cover the most ground in 30 minutes. Do or take. I want to go into graphics because the environments look stunning. Every single background for every single room looks like they function properly. Not even a single background aside from the save and map rooms, as well as kind of the Atom room sometimes, are reused here. Everything else is original and made sure so it completely fits in the area. No more of that square-based architecture they would have in a lot of the other Metroid games. They would have a lot more fluid, a lot more crevices. The caves actually feel like they're jagged. The surfaces, the texturing is very nice. No more flat pixel lines making up walls, but entire pipe sections. That makes a lot more convincing as an environment that you would actually use to research, or actual environments that creatures use to live in. And they all absolutely look gorgeous. The lighting is beautiful. I don't know how Nintendo keeps doing this, but some of the reflections in the game are also great. Some of the save rooms, I've only noticed this after a bit, but if you just don't activate anything in the save room, you can see Samus's reflection on the ground. I don't know how Nintendo keeps doing that because, like, the Switch doesn't have any ray tracing or anything. I guess they just did that manually, and it looks gorgeous. All of the enemy designs also look great. A lot of the enemies are super fun to counter and super fun to see what they do. I did want some returning enemies here and there, maybe some SR388 enemies, maybe some Zemis enemies, maybe some fusion enemies here and there, but we'll talk about that in the spoiler section because there are some previous game references here and there. But speaking of existing mechanics, many of the previous elements in the Metroid games have also been HDified. All the doors, all the save points, all the logical locations, even Samus's portrait sheet where she has all her abilities shown are kind of made so they make sense in the environment. Some portions just feel like you've took that 32-bit graphics filter off of Metroid Fusion and put an HD filter onto it. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the logical upgrades make it so you're still playing a Metroid game, but it looks beautiful. So I would have to say, props to Sakamoto. And also, one more thing, I was a little worried about the game's FPS. I've looked at the treehouse presentation and some of the intense boss cutscene moments get a little laggy time to time, but that is not the case in this game. It runs beautifully. The game will literally never load unless you're either loading up an entire section of the game, so in Super Metroid that's like going from Norfair to Madrida, like entire world map portions, or you die. Otherwise, the game never loads anything. Sometimes before and after a cutscene it might load, but other than that, the load times are zero. Like practically, it's just running as fast as it can. And also, alongside the graphics, the sound designs fit perfectly. Some of the remixes from the old tunes make me so hype. Metroid from NES, Fusion, as well as some Super Metroid tracks are remixed, so they fit atmospherically more, but they're still kind of a neat reference. E.M.M.I sections are specifically designed to make you have a Pavlovian reaction to it. Basically, I can never open my microwave ever again after playing this game. The beeping noises are consistently linked to the E.M.M.I. Your brain immediately establishes a connection, so whenever you start hearing it, you start getting this guttural reaction in your stomach. It's absolutely amazing. Also, the Tegi sound design looks good. Switching to missiles, opening a map, opening doors, and as well as fighting monsters. And when the thing ramps up, the sound design is also ramped up perfectly, so like it feels adrenaline shocking. But enough with the cosmetics, right? What about the game itself? I want to start with difficulty because the bosses are kept nice and hard. I don't know how some of these bosses are being designed for a Nintendo game. I don't know how some of these bosses are being made to be played by a 12-year-old. Good luck Timmy for buying this game because he is not going to complete it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's a great thing. Difficulty is so good in a Metroid game because it encourages you to optimize your controls and then it prepares you for the next section of the game. It doesn't even need to be a boss fight, it just teaches you more about the mechanics so you can optimally move around the map. I think I learned the most from fighting the boss battles because they told me to use my abilities. They told me how to optimize my movement, how to react to counters better. They kept it hard, and I think Sakamoto even said he doesn't have any DDA in the game. DDA is dynamic difficulty adjustment. Basically, if you think you're playing a hard game, you're actually not playing a hard game because the game automatically adjusts the difficulty as you play the game. A good example of this is Doom. Even the hardest modes in Doom make sure your last little piece of health bar is actually more than you think it is. Some multiplayer games even do this. Gears of War infamously did this, but revealed it years later because let's be honest here, people would have been upset. Crash Bandicoot did this, so if you like Crash Bandicoot, the game is a lie, it's not actually that hard. But in Metroid, if they do a certain amount of damage, they will keep doing a certain amount of damage. It does not get easier. I literally checked by looking at my counter, and it does not decrease. Some of the bosses I failed multiple times, but they kept that damage as high as it possibly can be. Like, some bosses literally do... I wrote 2,000 on my script, 200 damage. It kind of feels like they're doing 2,000 damage because they just shred off E-tanks as much as you go. However, I will say the average healing is increased greatly from Fusion to compensate for that high amount of damage. I think it's taking this from the fact that Metroid Fusion had enemies dealing you high amounts of damage, but you like barely healed after you defeated them, so that's a really nice touch. I think that's a good balancing mechanic. You don't die as much often now from like random enemies you meet on the ground because of the counter mechanic. Make sure you have that healing constantly being thrown at you. So it makes it for a very refreshing and also non-pace breaking experience. You can like bust through things and that's totally fine. As for the exploration, infamously Metroid games do make the player think that they're stuck sometimes. I've faced this a lot in people who've played Super Metroid. I've talked to them like, oh, I can't get past this one room where I keep falling on the ground and there's like spikes on the ceiling and I can't run fast enough and like hold the B button and they can clear it. There are sections like that time to time, so it might be a little difficult for non-Metroid players, because at this point, I kind of developed this like sixth sense or whatever, like, oh, that definitely is breakable. Oh, that's a one wide wall, I can break that. Oh, I have this sense in me that, ooh, I can do this, that, whatever. That's something that I have, but obviously the average player is not going to be a loser like me, so I don't know how Nintendo can think everyone can beat this Metroid game, but it is nice and hard, so I guess they'll have to face it anyway. Before we also talk about game design, I want to talk about the cinematography. There are a lot of cutscenes scattered through this game, whether if it's a boss, meeting an E.M.M.I, an upgrade encounter. You can make sure Samus will always have some kind of emotionless stance pose for you to admire. Especially with the first cutscene, it is action-packed. It is great. Some of the cutscenes feature the ability, but they don't need to explicitly tell you what it is. By just looking, you know what it is. You know, show don't tell. That's very important. This game embraces that. And by all means, with these cutscenes, it feels more like a Metroid game optimized for this decade, and I love that feeling. But enough with all the extra game design stuff. Let's get to the actual game design of the game, because this is the highest echelon of game design that has ever been recorded onto human history. I say that, but oh my god, it's good. As for the Metroid linearity scale, if one end has Metroid NES for its open worldness and the other has Metroid Fusion for its airtight linear design, I'd say Dread is about here. Not crazy open world, but definitely does feel like there's a lot of secrets jam-packed in here. All the sequences link together smoothly, all the upgrades make sure they are compatible to each other very well. The puzzles interlock together so satisfyingly, and because of Samus' speed, even if you think you're far away from the location you want to go, she can like zoom past that. 2 or 3 minutes is all enough to take from get to one corner to the other corner of the map. But that doesn't mean this game is short. So far, up to what I've got, this game is long, this game is great, and this game has so much speedrunning potential. I don't know if there's going to be a New Game Plus. They better. God, I would love that. I don't know if there's some kind of clear time that gives us the Justin Bailey outfit of Samus. I love that too. I wish Samus had green hair, to be honest. I think that design is so much more interesting. But also, I didn't just get the game. I also got the Samus Aran amiibo. It looks really nice, and I got it because it gives you a free energy tank, which, let's hope 100% completion doesn't require that, because no way I am not getting the E.M.M.I amiibo. That is going to go out of stock immediately. And before we move on to the spoilers, I want to address some of the complaints. I cannot think of any. I could try and dig some complaints here and there, but there are obviously easy reasons on why they're the case, and so far, every other part of this game has been absolutely mind-bogglingly amazing. I guess the fact that this one in particular doesn't try to do anything crazy new may be a complaint, but that implies that Fusion literally came out last week, and that's just not true! It's been 19 years! I think we needed this refresher. Mayhaps the beam was a bit hard to control if you didn't catch the memo that you had to hold right, but that's incredibly minor, and honestly, I don't really care about that. I'm now just kind of thinking off the top of my head if I could complain about anything in this game at this point. Mayhaps some of the areas look a bit generic, like the E.M.M.I sections all kind of blend into each other. But I think they do that entirely just because they want you to shift your focus onto the E.M.M.I. Some of the underwater sections are a bit slow, but honestly, I don't really mind because they've found out new ways to use abilities like that, and how that can be used to move horizontally across water sections. That's a neat thing they've introduced. But enough of that, let's talk about spoilers. I want to talk about spoilers. I really want to, and if you keep watching from here, you're gonna ruin the game. Please go buy this game. This game is amazing. If you don't have the money, just don't watch this video. Go on a media blackout until you get the money and go buy this game. This game is 10 out of 10 for me so far. Maybe a 99.999999999 because I still haven't met the animals. But we don't know. We don't know. I haven't completed this game. Now, I want to talk about the upgrades. Upgrading is a really fun experience in this game. People say that you need to get all these upgrades over and over and over again, but I kind of really don't mind. Because think about it, the order in this game is Charge Beam, Monkey Climb, Cloak, White Beam, Ball, Varia, and then Bomb. It's a little weird, and that's great. It's really fun to see which order you get them and how they complement each other and how they you know, work together to create the full experience, because sometimes you start with Morph Ball, but other times you start with Charge Beam, and I love how that changes the way the game is fundamentally designed. It's super interesting to see, and I want them to keep doing that. There's also multiple sources in which you get your upgrades. Sometimes it's on a Chozo like usual, sometimes it's in an E.M.M.I, sometimes a Scorpion inhaled it with its tail, and sometimes it's just kind of there. But one thing I really like are the energy parts. Something to collect on the side that are much easier to get than everything else, and is rewarding after a bit. It's a fourth of an energy tank, but there's no reason you wouldn't collect it. As for the suit designs, I love how the gravity suit in particular looks. The pink and purple looks cool, and I love it. Going back to the topic of old things getting new designs, I'll say this again, but I love how well they've made some of these old pixel art and translate it into a graphical evolution logically. Look, out of all things, I did not prepare myself to immediately be able to recall the X-Parasite capsule after you defeat every boss in Fusion. That is great, that is fun, that's a nice Easter egg, and my oh my, why haven't you put Fusion on Nintendo Switch yet? I love what they did to the Chozo. A lot of the old Metroid media presented them as old wrinkly creatures, but in this game, they're old, but not too old. And man, that one guy's expressions were so well made. Speaking of which, this game so far has full voice acting, at least in terms of a Metroid game anyways. Samus doesn't speak too much, but that alone is surprising. And also super telling of how large this game's budget was. This even more emphasizes the fact that, bro, buy this effing game. Some bonus stuff here and there. I love how they reference the previous game in a little bit of a meta sort of way. Aside from all the cutscenes giving us an HD rendition of the SAX, the Super Metroids, the Metroid Larvaes, the Metroid Omegas, and all that good old Metroid 2 stuff, there's some cute little references here and there, like how this sprite representing the Metroid is literally just pulled out from the old NES game. Like I said, I haven't completed the full game yet, but I do want to see the Edikuns and Decoras from Fusion and Super. They're great, and if you can get some HD cuteness out of that, that would make me feel great. But as of right now, I would give this game a 10 out of Metroid Other M, which is like 1,000 points better than a full score, but I don't know, let's not think about that. If I directly started comparing it with every other previous game, or just any other Metroidvania game, you will not be able to see the end of this video. I might make a tier list, however, I will definitely make a speedrun. The way I think of it, let's say we have all the Metroidvania games in the world. This game is good, and let's say they all have the same amount of good design. I don't know about you, Metroid NES, but let's just say you're good design. Even if they all have amazing design and sometimes even arguably better designs, like Hollow Knight for example, Metroid Dread is the only one where I've actually had a reaction to things. Like, I feel the E.M.M.I coming towards me, and I feel the anxiety when the E.M.M.I screws over me. I feel the safety when I meet Adam and the immediate disappointment when I hear his voice. Oh my god, I sound like this. And that in itself makes it so like you're literally playing as Samus sometimes. It just adds on to that amazing illusion that you are alone. Everyone else wants to kill you, and you better get out of that planet quickly. But aside from that, expect me to play this game over and over and over and over again. Like, aside from all the background speedrun, I am planning on a Metroid speedrun with some friends simultaneously, by the way. Over on my Twitch, TTV/BetaBlaster, join the Discord!